Yo, what is up, boys? It is your boy Zeldris here, and I am back at it again to drop What If Deku was Demon King Zeldris? More specifically, what if Deku was the reincarnation of Zeldris? Now, before I do actually get started with this What If movie, I do have two quick announcements to make. Number one, this video is being sponsored by Blue Keith himself. Now, if you don't know who Blue Keith himself is, he is a living legend. This is one of my boys, and he did a commission What If with you boys, so I had to make sure that this What If is fire for him, as well as go check out his links down in the description. He makes some pretty dope art, so in case you guys want to ask him for some artwork of your favorite characters, you guys can go do that, seeing as he does some pretty cool art commissions. And also, last announcement, just a very quick plug, I made a group channel recently with some other What If YouTubers, and I would appreciate it if you guys went down to the description and also check that link out. That being said, I think this intro's been long enough, so let's just go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're going to be starting this What If off on the day that Deku is born. See, this version of Deku is going to look exactly like what Zeldris looked like. He is literally going to be the spitting image of Zeldris as soon as he's born. Now, this of course would lead to our boy Hisashi doing his usual stuff that he does on this channel. He would proceed to be like, "That baby ain't mine," and Inko would just look at him and she's like, "Hisashi, I would never," and he's just like, "Nope, I want to test." So, 30 minutes later, they get a test done, and it is revealed that yes, that is Hisashi's son. Afterwards, Inko would just give Hisashi the stare of death, and Hisashi would just be terrified, knowing he just messed up bad. The nurse would basically come into the room and just tell them that the baby most likely looks like that because of his quirk. And this is when Hisashi would finally realize that he was so dumb for that, and he should have just thought that off rip. But he would look towards Inko and basically just apologize to her as he hugs her, and he looks at baby Zuku as he basically just starts being like, "Hey Zuku, what's up?" And Deku, being a baby, would just begin to cry and do usual baby stuff. That being said, this is when the doctor would proceed to explain that, yeah, it must be due to his quirk. Make sure to bring him in when he's around the age of 4, and we will just study his quirk to see what it is. So, yeah, that's basically what happens. Now, this version of Deku is going to grow up quirkless until he's at the age of 5, meaning that once he turns 4 years old, he is going to be bullied for about 1 year due to being quirkless in this, new world and age of, quirked people. People like Bakugo and his goons would definitely do a lot of bullying to Deku, and Deku just honestly wouldn't really understand why. I mean, before, when nobody had quirks, they were all friends, and Bakugo was like his best friend, but I guess now Bakugo just moved on to bigger and better things. Deku would just wonder why Bakugo always treats him this way, and Deku would just go on with his life. Everything would be normal, and Deku would be getting picked on as you would expect from the normal canon version of Izuku. However, one day when Deku is getting picked on, Deku would basically just be outside on the playground, where Deku would just be hanging onto the monkey bars, trying to go from side to side. And yes, our boy Deku has some massive, he's pretty strong physically, just due to the fact that, he's Zeldris' reincarnation. So, Deku would be on the monkey bars, the monkey, and this is when Bakugo and his goons would come in, and they would basically hit Deku on his arm, causing Deku to basically fall off, and immediately you can hear a popping noise, like a crack, as Deku would start immediately crying. But about 5 seconds into it, Deku would look up at Bakugo and just see Bakugo laughing. Like, the goons are scared and they're wondering why Bakugo did that. And Bakugo just sitting there laughing in Deku's face after he literally just broke his arm. After this, Deku's eyes would flash black, and like he would get black tendrils that would pop out of his body, as immediately his voice would go from Deku's to Zeldris, and he would say, "How dare you, you human scum!" As immediately Bakugo would just get destroyed by Deku. Deku would literally proceed to grab Bakugo by the leg and slam him onto the ground, breaking his arm, and Deku would then proceed to grab his other arm and just snap that thing like a twig. As Deku would start unleashing a bunch of punishment onto of Bakugo, and the kids on the playground would start yelling for a teacher. So the teacher would come and they would see what Deku was doing to Bakugo, as Deku would almost have killed Bakugo if it wasn't for a pro hero who was actually standing by, was able to restrain Deku just barely. But even he got injured because Deku was just far too gone. And Zeldris snapped. I mean, Zeldris is literally within Deku, and he can actually take over Deku's body and mind whenever the time calls for it. But yeah, Bakugo would get injured pretty bad with a permanent scar across his chest, which would have been a slash from Deku, and he would have almost died. I mean, he deserved it. I mean, how are you going to bully a kid like that and just not expect for something like that to happen? Like, come on now. This is when Deku's parents would immediately just rush Deku to the Quirk doctor, and Deku would just be told that, you know, they don't know what's going on. Like, he must be a new type of Quirk user, because they just can't seem to track his Quirk. I mean, from what the teachers are saying and from what everybody's been saying, he obviously has some sort of power, but it may be a mutation that we are not yet able to identify. To which Deku and Inko and Asashi would all just basically be wondering why not, and Inko would ask why these doctors can't just figure it out. I mean, this is their job, right? The doctor would look at Inko as he would say that, yes, ma'am, he understands her worries and why she's like this, but for the time being, they simply just can't do a thing for Deku. As Inko would get pretty upset by this notion, and she would just proceed to basically look at Deku as she would say, come on, Deku, we're leaving. As Deku would get on the car, and they would basically all drive home. As immediately, Deku would basically have to go back to school the very next day with his parents to see what the consequences are going to be. Inko would be expecting maybe a suspension, or maybe he was, you know, like told that he's going to have some detention for like a couple days. But as soon as they arrived, they would sit down at the principal's desk, and the principal would look at them as he would say, listen, I understand your son's quirk activated at the wrong time, but the fact of the matter is that his quirk is dangerous, and we just simply cannot allow anybody like that to be at our school. We have also put in measures so that he cannot come into any schools in this area at all. And Deku would basically look at Inko and his parents as he would proceed to wonder if this is really true, as Inko would get angry and she would say, what? What do you mean my son can't come to school in this area at all? We live here. How is he supposed to get any education? Inko would basically get really angry and stand up, as she would say, now I can see where Deku gets all this, you know, all this hatred and anger from. The apple, I guess, doesn't really fall far from the tree. Inka would look at the principal, and this is when she would just get angry, as Hasashi would just get pissed off, and he would slam the desk, as he would proceed to say that there's no way that this is justice. His quirk malfunctioned, and if it would have been any other kid, if Bakugo would have done that to Deku, they wouldn't have done a thing about it. Speaking of which, Bakugo's left Deku with countless of scars, and he's hurt him many, many times. The principal would look at them as they would say that, you know, that's just kids playing around, and that Bakugo may have gone a little too far, but he never almost put Deku to the brink of death, and that's what Deku did today, or yesterday. And Hisashi would just get angry, as he would proceed to basically get escorted out by the security guards due to him not being able to control himself. After this, Inka would look at the principal, and she would just give her a little bit of a death stare, as the principal would be kind of scared of that stare that Inko gave her. I mean, Mama Inko do be threatening though, and you know, this would basically lead into them all basically going home and realizing that Deku's not going to get any good education unless they school him from home or something. And they would basically look at Deku as they would try homeschooling for about a month, but it just simply wouldn't work. And it's at this point in time that they would realize that they would definitely have to be moving away from the area if they want Deku to have a brighter future than themselves. So that's just what they would do. They would move over to Husu City, but sadly the bills and just the housings was just too expensive. So they had to move into the more shady area. And this is where the true story would start. So it's at this point that Deku and his family basically your boy gotta clear his throat. Pause. And yeah, Deku would basically get expelled, with, you know, his family having no choice but to move over to Hosu City for Deku to get the chance to even go to school whatsoever. This would lead into Deku living a rough 2 years basically, in the new area, because, the kids around there are much worse than Bakugo. They literally steal from kids and they beat people up. They gang on each other. And most of the kids around that area are just around a horrible environment, just period. Like, they're just having a pretty bad, just upbringing. So many of them just kind of get caught up in the lifestyle. And this would lead into Deku basically having a pretty rough life for the first 2 years that he lives there. As at this point, Deku would be 7 years old, and it would be on one particular day where Deku would basically getting picked on by some of the random kids in the cafeteria, as Deku just gets pushed into the table where his head hits the side of the table and he just passes out. A couple hours later, Deku would wake up, but he wouldn't be inside of the cafeteria or even his house. Oh, guys, apologize for the background noise. I'm going to be pausing. Actually, you know what? That is a trash can. That is a trash little guy, compactor guy thingy. But boy, can't do a thing about that. Just apologies for the background noise, and we're gonna keep going. Anyways, that being said, though, this is essentially how things are going to be going, and well, Deku is pretty much just going to be having a pretty rough life, where he would wake up 2 hours later, and it's at this moment where Deku would open his eyes and he would see a man who looks a lot like Zeldris. He would see Zeldris not in his adult form or in his Demon King form, but in the form that we saw him when he was first introduced to us. He would look towards Zeldris as Deku would ask who he is, and Zeldris would look at Deku as he would give him a smile, and he would then tell him, "You're me." As Deku would look at Zeldris and he would say, "What do you mean?" Zeldris would then begin to explain to Deku that he is his reincarnation. So in a sense, you are him. As Deku would basically know what a reincarnation is, but he would be like, "What? I'm your reincarnation?" As Zeldris would explain to Deku that he is. And he would tell him that he's the source of that power that was unleashed on that fateful day. He would proceed to apologize to Deku for what he had done that day. And Deku would say, "What do you mean? That was my fault." As Zeldris would shake his head and tell him that he stepped in. He took control over Deku's body after that happened, and he just couldn't handle having that little brat bother Deku anymore. I mean, he was never able to step up for himself or do a thing or even run away from them. As Zeldris would look towards Deku and apologize, Deku would look at Zeldris and he would basically just say that it's fine. There's really no reason to, dwell on that anymore. They've already been here for about 2 years, so, they're already, having normal things go as they would go in canon. And Zeldris will then explain to Deku that he can make him powerful. He can show him how to become a powerful hero someday. And Deku would ask him how he knows about that, to which Zeldris would say, "The life that you've been living, I've been able to watch continuously through the past couple of years. I'm always watching over you, kid." As Deku would look at Zeldris and he would basically give him a little bit of a half smile, like a half weird look. And Zeldris would then look at Deku as he would say that, it seems a little weird at first, but, as soon as you get into the concept of reincarnation, everything just starts getting a little foggy, I guess you could say. That being said, though, Deku would basically... snuck up behind me. Anyways, Deku would basically proceed to look at Zeldris, as Zeldris would stick his hand out to Deku, and Deku would immediately grab it, telling him that he's ready, and Zeldris would say he better be, because for the next couple of years, they're going to train like he's never done before. And from then on, Deku would begin image training and mental training as well as physical training for the next couple of years. And Zeldris during this time would definitely explain to Deku that, well, he's his reincarnation. So that means that he would have all of his previous powers that he had during his era. As Deku would ask what those powers are, Zeldris would tell Deku that they were great powers. He had the ability to destroy mountains. And he would look towards Deku's direction as he would explain to him that someday he may be that strong or maybe even better. But he would look at Deku as he would get on an eye-to-eye level with Deku, as at this point Deku's like 12 years old. He'd be about the height of Zeldris, and he would actually look just like Zeldris at this point. He's about 12 years old, and I feel like the Zeldris version we got in canon was like a high schooler looking Zeldris, but you know, at this point he's slowly starting to look like Zeldris, right? Now, this is when Zeldris would basically get on an eye level with Deku. Oh my god. So early. Oh. And Zeldris would get on an eye level with Deku, as he would proceed to look at him and tell him that during the time that he was alive, he wasn't a good person, I guess you could say. If anything, he was the antagonist to his brother's life. As Deku would ask who his brother was, Zeldris would explain that he had a big brother by the name of Meliodas. He was the best you could ever ask for, but one day their father caused everything to change, and Zeldris had to fill the role of, you know, just serving him, as he wanted the throne to the Demon King. Deku would say, Demon King? As Zeldris would explain to Deku that he is a demon, in essence. Deku is literally a demon because, well, I mean, if Zeldris was a demon and he's the reincarnation, a part of him definitely is demon, so he's part demon, part human. And Deku would look up at Zeldris as he would say, so I'm demonic? Zeldris would look up at Deku as he would say, being a demon doesn't make you evil. I know that all the things that you've basically been told about demons all paint a picture of awful people, but truth be told, many demons aren't even like that. Or at least the ones with a sense of morality. As Deku would look up at Zeldris, he would say, yeah. As Deku would proceed to basically look around, and he would look right at his hands as he just balls them up in a fist, and he would say, I guess this means I ain't weak after all. And Zeldris would start to laugh, with Deku doing the same, and the training would basically continue for, well, as long as they basically can. At this point, UA in this version is actually going to be a college, just due to the fact that if this version of Deku goes into high school, things are not going to play out in the way that I want them to. So this version of UA is going to be a college, and in terms of Deku growing up after the age of 12, Deku would finally start being able to defend other kids. He would finally start doing something with his life, and he would start training and getting more and more powerful. By the time that he was in high school, he was as strong as the leader of the 10 Commandments, Zeldris, and his sword skills were unparalleled, second to none, except for, you know, the original. And, well, Deku would just become more and more powerful as the days would go on. This would lead into Deku getting to his early 20s, as at this point Deku had basically moved away from his parents' house, and he had ended up just basically going to college. He wouldn't be living with his parents just due to the fact that his parents actually ended up, you know, basically staying towards Husu, and Deku ended up, you know, basically moving them back to the area where they used to live at. Deku. Oh god, I am tired. Sheesh. But I have to bring this what if to y'all. I have to hit y'all with the flames. This what if is too good. Anyways, you know, Deku would basically start, you know, moving his family back to the area where they used to live at. And seeing as Deku's not going to school for the, you know, elementary or high school like that, Deku could definitely go into UA. So he would put in his UA form. And at this point, I'm just going to skip on over to the day of the UA entrance assessment, seeing as this whole life he's been training. So there's no real purpose to explain the 10 months. Also, in case you're curious of what Deku looks like after all these years, and by the time that he's about 20 years old, Deku would look like a young Demon King Zeldris. I don't know if you guys can remember, but if many of you guys have read the manga or watched the anime and are caught up with the 7 Deadly Sins, you would have seen that after Zeldris' little trainer guy would have basically healed him and brought him back to life by instilling the 10 Commandments into him, Zeldris would have basically looked like a young version of, like an older version of himself, but not quite the one that you guys see in the thumbnail. Kind of like the middle ground, I guess you could say. And that's exactly what Deku looks like. So, Yeah, Deku would basically proceed to get all of his stuff in order, and he would basically just send his parents a text telling them that he's going to go take the entrance exams. As his parents would just be smiling, telling him that, see, he can become a hero, and all of these years were worth it. As Deku would smile, and Deku would proceed to basically take a train over to the UA entrance exams. As Deku would basically proceed to walk over that area, to which Deku would see a familiar face. Deku would see a boy with blonde hair and some weird brownish crimson looking eyes. I don't know what color Bakugo's eyes are. They're like an orange reddish tint, I guess you could say. Deku would see Bakugo immediately, and it would be unmistakable. As soon as Deku lays his eyes on Bakugo, a rage would fuel up in his heart, and his eyes would go pure black. But Zeldris would proceed to tell Deku to calm down. It's not worth it. He's finally at UA. His dream is going to be a reality, and he can't let that go due to a grudge. Deku would calm himself down and breathe as he would go, "You're right." As his eyes would go back to normal, and a girl would have actually been walking by. This being Uraraka, she would ask him if he's okay, and Deku would say that it's fine. And she would ask why his eyes went completely dark. Deku would say that it's just part of his quirk, that he has some weird, a quirk that would change his physical features. Uraraka would look up at Deku as she would proceed to say that, his quirk seems awesome if his quirk gives him some physical changes. She hopes it's not too drastic, and Deku would say that it's not, as immediately Deku would walk inside there with Uraraka, and they would begin to talk, as this version of Deku has a way different personality than the one that we have in canon. He has a little bit of a mix between Deku and Zeldris, so he's kind of like a little bit of the middle ground, I guess you could say. And this what if could even be named What If Zeldris was an MHA, since technically that's kind of what it is, but not really. That being said, Deku would walk inside, and he would actually not sit next to Bakugo due to the fact that they don't go to the same school. They would sit pretty far from each other, and they wouldn't even notice each other, meaning Deku's not sitting anywhere close to Ida. So he's not going to be muttering in the first place, and there would be no real reason for any of those situations that happened in the original to be happening anymore. So this would lead into Deku just taking the test as he would per usual, and nothing would really happen. Deku would ace the test. He's a pretty smart individual just due to the fact that, well, Deku's smart, and Zeldris is intelligent as well. So if you combine those, it just makes a super genius. And, this isn't what if Deku was smart, but, he is pretty smart at that. This would lead into Deku going outside and being one of the first people who actually completed the exam. He would actually notice that Uraraka's actually out there by the front, and Deku would immediately walk over to her with Ida not being anywhere in sight. He would proceed to tell Uraraka that she looks a little nervous, and she would tell Deku that she is nervous. I mean, she's never done anything like this before. And Deku would look at her, she would say that again. Nah, trolling. But seriously, Deku would look at her. He would say, "Well, just breathe in and out, and I promise you'll be fine." And in the back of his head, he would be thinking, if you can even get to destroy any robots. As Deku would basically just be standing at the gate. And this is when Deku would kind of get sick of waiting for the rest of the kids. But about 20 minutes would go by, and this is when everybody would be outside. Deku would take one breath in, and immediately he would destroy the gates. As in an instant, Deku would obliterate every single robot in the facility. He would have speed blitzed and cut down every single robot within a millisecond before anybody could have noticed. And what everybody saw Deku do is legit just pulling his sword out of its sheath and just putting it back in. That's literally all you saw. Some pretty cool swordsmanship abilities, I guess you could say. And yeah, that's basically all you would basically see from Deku by the other kids' perspectives. Deku would proceed to basically just be told in the speakers that kid is incredible. He's the spitting image of what a pro hero should be. He waited for nobody to tell him go, and that's exactly what they were supposed to do. But Deku would then basically just be called into the office, and this is where Deku would be told by Principal Nezu that he is immediately going to be into UA, and that he's actually going to get a scholarship, everything paid for. So Deku pretty much gets moved into the UA dormitory system, and Deku's one of the first ones there. This would lead into Deku basically just going back home and telling his parents the good news, as they would be ecstatic and they would just basically start hugging Deku. His dad would ruffle up his hair and tell him that he knew he had it in him all along, and Inka would crack a joke talking about, pretty sure you didn't even think Deku was your son. And Hisashi would go red in the face as Deku would ask what he means. Hisashi would say that it's nothing, don't worry about it. As Deku would kind of just sit there and be like, alright, I'm pretty sure it's something, but if you don't want me to know, then I guess it's cool. And that's pretty much how things would essentially just be playing out for now. This would lead into Deku basically just going through normal day-to-day activities, and he would eventually have to go to UA, where he would begin his first day. This is when Deku would immediately walk in through the door, and he would see Bakugo sitting at the desk just arguing with Ida. Deku would decide to just ignore him, and this is when Bakugo would notice Deku almost immediately. Bakugo would immediately notice that Deku just walked past him, and this is when Bakugo would look towards Ida and just give him a stare, telling Ida to leave him alone. As yes, everything that basically everything that happened in normal is going to happen now, except everyone's just going to be older. And All Might, in terms of his injury, just to say that it's going to make more sense for All Might to, because I don't feel like All Might would have realistically lasted this long. I'm just going to say that his injury happened basically as many years before All Might was in school teaching. So that many years ago, just minus the age that he's at now. So yeah, basically that's what happened. And that means that he just recently got the injury, not a long time ago like it would be if I was to keep everything canonical to its original. And yeah, this would basically lead into Deku going at the back. This is when Bakugo would begin to walk up to Deku, as he would say, "You got some nerve coming over here, Deku." As Deku would look over at Bakugo, and he would kind of just not say a word. As this is when Uraraka would run over to Deku, and she would say, "Hey Deku, how?" As immediately Deku would just Bakugo, no, not Deku, but Bakugo would stare at Uraraka, and she would say, "You know this villain?" And Uraraka would say, "Yeah, that's Deku. He's I met him in the entrance exam." As Bakugo would look at her and tell her, "If you know what's good for you, you'll stay away from this villain. He almost killed me when we were kids. And for what? For teasing him?" As he would walk away over to his seat, and Uraraka would just give Deku a weird stare. She would look at Deku in a very weird way and just kind of sit away from Deku. As this is when Aizawa would stand up, and he would begin to tell the class to meet him outside. As Deku would go into the changing room, he would of course basically be told by Kirishima that, what does he do? The man is ripped. Deku would literally be repping an 8-pack at this point, and Deku would definitely have the spitting image of a Greek god's body. Deku would be pretty, he'd be pretty physically, dominant, and Kirishima would just be pretty enticed by this. This is when Mineta would do his usual perving thing, and Deku would look at Mineta as he would just stare at him, just letting Mineta know that he should not be doing that. Mineta would immediately step away, and this is when everybody would go outside, as this is when they would basically go outside and Deku would be thrown the ball, as he would immediately throw that thing into outer space. He would just chuck that thing straight out into orbit, and immediately Deku would look back at Aizawa, as Aizawa would smile, thinking like, this kid. And this is when Bakugo would stop everything, as he would say, "What do you mean, this kid? You mean this villain?" As everybody would stop, and Aizawa would say, "What are you talking about, Katsuki Bakugo?" As Bakugo would then begin to tell the rest of the class what happened when they were kids. And Deku would look at Bakugo, as Bakugo would just smile in Deku's face, telling him that he's gonna ruin his chances at getting into UA. As he would just whisper that in his ear. Deku would look at Bakugo as he would give him a stare, which Bakugo would just laugh at, and he would say, "I'm gonna turn the world against you, Deku. You made the first couple of years of school hell for me. Now I'm gonna make your life a living hell." As Deku would look towards Bakugo's direction and just be filled with anger, as immediately some of the people in class would begin to believe what Bakugo's saying, just believing the lies that Bakugo was feeding everybody. Also guys, apologies for the background noise. You know what, I'm just gonna stop the recording until that the car goes away. Okay, we're back. Now, anyways, this would lead into Deku just giving Bakugo a stare, to which Bakugo would ignore. And this Deku would proceed to basically just continue with the rest of the test, with Aizawa not really changing his mind about Deku, and everybody in the class kind of having mixed feelings about what Bakugo just said. I mean, they know that he's rowdy, so it might just be a lie. And Kirishima would walk up to Deku as he would say, "Hey man, don't worry about it. It's just him, he's just a rowdy kid. He might have just been spreading lies about you." Deku would look at Kirishima as he would smile in his direction, and Deku would basically just fist bump him as he would say, "Yeah, I won't." As they would continue doing the rest of the test, Deku would obliterate everything, and he would show glimpses of his demon form. As this is when Bakugo would yell out into the class, "Look at him. He's a demon. Look at his quirk. It's so demonic. It gives a weird, evil presence when he uses the power." Deku would look at Bakugo, and some of the people in the class would begin to just start nodding in agreement with Bakugo. Bakugo would look towards Deku as he would smile, and this is when he would basically just finish off the rest of the exams. And they would basically just be told that they're going to be finishing up for today and to just basically go to his dorm. As Deku would do just that, he would go to his dorm, and this is when Bakugo would basically stay a little bit later after class, just talking to everybody in the classroom, with Deku just leaving, realizing that Bakugo just ruined his only hope of being good in UA. Zeldris would have told him not to do a thing, because if he was to do anything to Bakugo, he would prove his point. All he has to do is prove Bakugo wrong. He's not a bad person. He's not a bad person. Bakugo would continue spreading lies about Deku, and Deku would just go on, just thinking that he's used to it, ignoring it, and this would lead into Deku basically just going back the very next day, but Bakugo just continued saying that Deku was just a monster. He would twist everything that really happened, and Deku would basically just start having enough of it at this point. As the very next day, when Deku walks in, Bakugo would have said, "Look, it's the demon. Looks like he's back for more." As people would start giving Deku weird stares, Deku would walk right over to Bakugo's desk and he would say, "You got some nerve spreading those lies about me." As he would basically proceed to say, "You want me to put you 6 feet under?" As people in the class would begin to stand up and get in front of Bakugo, as they would say, "I think it's best for you to leave." And Deku would basically proceed to go back to his seat, to which everybody would look at Deku and tell him that it's best for him to leave out of there. As Deku would just get out of the class, and Aizawa would then tell Deku to go back inside. He hasn't heard the rest of the side of the story from Deku, so at this point he doesn't really think much of him. But this is when Deku would walk inside, and Aizawa would see the way that all the students are looking at Deku. As immediately, he would basically just look at all of them, and this is when they would basically just have a normal class. About 2 days later is when they would have the heroes versus villains little thing happen, and this is when All Might would bust in through the door looking even older than the original, saying, "I am here, coming in like a normal person." As basically everybody in the class would go crazy and they would forget all about Deku. Deku would just be in the back, just kind of angry at Bakugo, and Zeldris would just be telling him to not let anger fuel his actions. Zeldris went about life that way, and it led him to this. That's not the way to live. Deku would tell him that it might just be. As he would just listen to Zeldris, just barely at this point. And this is when Deku would proceed to basically just go outside and get dressed with his hero costume, which would be that fit of a demon king. As soon as he steps outside, some people would actually look at Deku's costume and think it's actually pretty awesome. People like Kirishima and Mineta and Kaminari. Those 3 people are still kind of iffy about Deku, and they don't know whether they should believe Bakugo. But people like Ida, Uraraka, Momo, and Todoroki, they all just took Bakugo's word for it. At this point, Deku's basically told that he's going to be taking the exams, and it's at this point that, people would begin to say, "Alright, so the teams is going to be 2-on-2 battles." To which Bakugo raises his hand and he says, does he really think that that's fair? I mean, he saw what that kid over there did in the normal battle, right? Against the robots, he destroyed each and every single one of them in under a millisecond. If he was to fight against any of the normal students here, he would easily destroy any of us. As Bakugo would just be saying that, putting up a little bit of a facade, as people in the class would say, "Yeah, that's true. I mean, I know we're trying to be heroes and all, but there's some things that are just impossible." As All Might would look at the class and he would ask them how they want to do things. They would look at All Might and they would say, "How about all of us versus him?" And Deku would look at them as they would all basically just say, yeah. All Might would say that that's insane. And this is when Deku would step up and he would say, that's fine with me. As All Might would look at Deku and he would say, alright. And this is when Aizawa would walk in there as he would say, and me. As Deku would look at him and give him a smile. But Aizawa would then look towards All Might and say, look at Deku, and say, oh, you thought I meant with you? No, I'm with the kids. As Aizawa would side with Bakugo finally. He would have finally gotten Aizawa on his side. And it's at this point where Deku would proceed to basically just grit his teeth and squeeze his fist in a ball, as he would say that today he's going to get some revenge. As it's at this point that Deku basically just gets told that the battle is going to start. And it's at this point that Deku basically activates his demon mode. He would proceed to blitz at each and every single person except for Bakugo and just destroy them. He would tear each and every single person limb from limb. The first one to rush at him would have of course been Ida, just due to his speed, and he would have tried using a reciprocal burst right at Deku's head, to which Deku would grab Ida's leg and break it. As soon as Ida kicked him, Deku would grab it and slam his elbow into his knee, as he would have just shattered that and thrown him off of there. As Aizawa would come in next, using his quirky erasure quirk, as he would have thought that that would have been more than enough to take down Deku. But oh boy, was he wrong. That's not a quirk. That's demonic mana. As immediately Aizawa would be grabbed by the throat by Deku, and he would stare at him with those demon eyes, as he would just slam Aizawa into the concrete and knock him out, which would lead into Deku looking at the rest of them, to which he would say, Dark Nebula. And everybody would just get sucked in, as they would all just proceed to get destroyed by Deku. And this would lead into Bakugo versus Deku, to which Bakugo would decide that he's going to definitely put the final nail in the coffin. Deku would run after Bakugo, and Bakugo would begin to run away saying, All Might, help! He's gonna kill! But before he could say anything, All Might would have already blitzed in there, and right before Deku was just gonna hit Bakugo and knock him out unconscious, All Might would catch the fist and say that that's enough, you villain, as he would crush Deku's hand as much as he physically could, and Deku would then look at his idol, his hero. All Might turned against him. All Might would look towards Deku as he would say that that's enough, and Deku would then be basically kicked out of that area. As after this, Nezu would call Deku by the speakers, and he would proceed to expel Deku from UA College, as that is not a behavior that is tolerated there at UA. You know, he broke a student's leg, hospitalized Aizawa, and the rest of the kids are in critical condition. Deku would look at Aizawa as he would say that they deserved it, and Aizawa would tell him that that's the perfect attitude to become a villain. He better check himself before he goes down the wrong path. And honestly, I don't know why people in UA try to kick away people who have like villainous tendencies. If anything, you should try to push those people to become heroes so that way they don't become a problem later on. It just doesn't make any sense. It's counterintuitive, I guess you could say. That being said, life for Deku would just spiral out of control, and immediately once he gets kicked out, all of his stuff would just be thrown to the curb, as Deku would just be left with nothing but his family. But a video would surface onto the internet of what Deku had done to the students, and when Deku returns home, his parents would look at Deku as they would tell him that, he really is a monster. Deku would look at them as they would basically just shun Deku out of their lives. And it's at this point that Deku would basically go to an abandoned warehouse, where Deku would just be filled with rage, and Deku would not know what to do with it. It would just start filling himself up, and it would eventually explode. But that's later. Deku would be talking to Zeldris in his mindscape, just saying that, he doesn't know how to help himself. He can't do a thing. But this is when a man would teleport through a portal. This man being All For One. He would begin to explain to Deku that he is the leader of the League of Villains, and he wants him to join his side. Maybe the heroes might have shunned him out for what he had done, but with him, he'll be praised for his power. He'll be praised for his actions, and he's free to do whatever he wants. Free to be his own person. As Deku would look towards All For One, Zeldris would tell Deku not to do it. But Deku would look at Zeldris and just kind of push him to the side, as he would take All For One's hand and become a member of the League of Villains, which would lead into the next week, which would basically be led with Deku meeting people like Shigaraki, Kurogiri, and all of the other villains who were with him at the time. He would be filled in on the plan to take out All Might, and instead of just having the Nomu be the reason that All Might gets taken out, All For One would trust Deku to be able to take All Might out himself. And Deku would, of course, having this rage fueling his heart, would of course just be ready to do whatever it takes to not be told that he's a villain. He would think about everything the night before this, and he would think, if they want me to be a villain, I'll become a villain. As it's at this moment that Zeldris in his mind would just say, I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but you can still be better, Deku. You're not like me. Deku would just shun Zeldris out and say it's whatever. He is him. He is literally him. He's free to make his own decisions, and who is he to tell him what he can and can't do? He did stuff even worse than he did. And Deku would just go to the area where they all going to be teleported away from. And it's at this point that UA college would just be transported over to the USJ event, where everything would start lining up to its original canonical version of the original canon, where people would just go in and 13 would give her lame speech, to which Deku would just be teleported into the area. As instead of Kurogiri being the one who teleports everybody away, Deku would have fallen down from the sky, as he would do a little bit of a superhero landing, and he would then begin to clap in front of everybody, to which 13 would shoot her black hole, and Deku would just say Kurogiri. As Kurogiri would have reversed it on 13, and she would get sucked into her own black hole completely. After that, Deku would see what he had just done, and he would begin to have some doubts. Deku's not a bad person. He was just molded to be one. I mean, his whole life has been leading him up to this. I mean, what other choice does he have? He's not a good guy, so he can only do one thing, and that is be a bad guy. As this would lead into Deku just basically looking towards Aizawa and knocking him out immediately, as he would proceed to unleash punishment onto the students. Right after, Kurogiri teleported the lot that got teleported, he would begin to put punishment onto the students that didn't get teleported away, and he would begin to just start grabbing Ida's engines. He would rip them out of his thighs, as he would just begin to beat on Ida. And he would take Ida out, as he would then direct his attentions towards Uraraka, to which Deku would blitz, and right before he could punch her, his arm would stop. As Deku would say, come on, why can't I bring myself to? He would remember Uraraka's smile and the kindness she had shown him. As Deku would look at Uraraka, Uraraka would touch Deku, and Deku would then begin to float. As he would whip out his demonic wings, he would blitz over to Uraraka, as right before he could hit her, he would hear Zeldris in his mind telling him not to do it. And every fiber in Deku's being is just telling Deku to not do it. It's just all showing Deku that this is not the right way. And Deku would pull his arm back, as he would realize what he has done. He just turned to the villain side. All just because he was kicked out of UA. He could have just gone to a different school. With what he had done, he's sure other schools would have accepted him. Regardless of what he had done, they could have changed him. But Deku took the wrong path. He would immediately look towards Shigaraki and the Nomu, as he would blitz towards that direction, and he would immediately just dismantle the Nomu, as he would cut the Nomu up into pieces that were unrecognizable, and he would cut off Shigaraki's arms, leading to Shigaraki being quirkless at this point, and he would then take out each and every single last one of the villains, to which All Might would never end up arriving. Deku would basically wake up Aizawa, and he would go over he would call the police, as the police would arrive, and this is when All Might would be called in as well, as Deku would just tell the police about what had happened, and tell them that he was working with the villains, but he realized he was wrong, and that he ended up helping them and saving everybody. And this is when the little police chief would look at Deku with a weird expression on his face, a sort of, you damn villain, you would change the story. with All Might landing, he would then look at Deku and he would then get filled in, as immediately, when Deku's just not even looking, All Might would come in and punch Deku square in the face, to which Deku's face would just turn slightly. Deku would spit out some blood onto the ground and he would look towards All Might as he would ask him what the meaning of that was, as All Might would then tell him that he's a villain and he has to handle villains accordingly. As this is when Deku's eyes would just flash dark, as he would say, he's tired. Everything he does, he's always pinned as the villain. As he would look towards All Might and grab him by the throat, as he would just crush it, and All Might would drop onto the ground as he would die right there. And this is when Deku would whip out his wings and just fly away, as he would go back to the abandoned warehouse. And this is when it would be all around the news that the symbol of peace, All Might, his time with them was over. Deku would then, just after flying away, begin to think about everything that led him up to this point. And Zeldris would then begin to explain to Deku that maybe there's still a chance to redeem himself. Deku would basically go back into his mind script and say, "You don't get it, do you? I killed the #1 hero. There's no going back for me. They want a villain. They want me to become bad. They want me to become a demon. I'll show them a demon." He would begin to go into a crazy laughter, as immediately he would say, "If they want me to be a villain, I'll be just that. Matter of fact, I'll be the greatest villain. If I can't be the greatest hero, I guess I'll just join the evil side." As he would look towards the direction of Zeldris and he would just ignore him completely, shunning him to the side, as he would begin to start becoming a little bit of a hero killer in himself, as he would just start destroying heroes left and right. And this is when Deku would finally go back to UA, as he's ready to exact his revenge on Bakugo. People in UA would try to defend Bakugo, but this one Deku would just destroy them in an instant. Their deaths, they would be shown mercy. Deku would in an instant just destroy them all, decapitating each and every single one of them in an instant. And Bakugo would look at Deku as his eyes are filled with fear. He would be on the ground just simply about to cry, saying, "Deku, I'm sorry. Deku, forgive me. I was wrong. You're not a..." As Deku would stare down at Bakugo with those eyes, he would then look towards Deku as he would say, "Well, you're sorry, it's just not gonna cut it. You ruined my life, Bakugo." All of his rage would come up to the surface, as Bakugo would say that, he was just jealous of him. He was jealous of his power, and he wanted to be the best. So if Deku was out of the picture, he could finally be the #1, but he was jealous to forgive him. He made a bad choice. If Deku just forgives him, he may just be forgiven. And Deku would look at Bakugo as he would say, "It's too late for me, Bakugo." As he would exact horrendous just torture onto Bakugo. And this is when Deku's eyes would just have a teardrop come down, as he would say that he didn't want this. He didn't want any of this. And this is when Deku would finally realize everything that he had done. He killed countless of heroes. His idol, UA students, Nezu, Bakugo. He would remember back to when he and Bakugo were close friends. And this is when Deku just would scream out into the heavens, as he would say, "No, no, no," as he would scream out like in a rage, and his rage would cover the entire planet as it would all explode. Deku's rage would be far too much, and in a similar fashion to his brother, Meliodas, who destroyed a continent, this version of Deku would be far more powerful than even that. His power would be even more than that of the Demon King Zeldris when he fought Ultimate the One Escanor. So this version of Deku would have destroyed the planet. And that is where we're going to be ending off. What if Deku was Demon King Zeldris? I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Some of you guys may have been like, "Yo, Zether, chill out, bro. Like, what's up with this story?" But to that, honestly, boys, I wanted to do a little bit of a different Deku. I wanted to truly make this one be a little different than my usual ones. I usually don't go with the villain route. I usually make him pretty OP as a hero. But this time I decided that I was going to go towards a different approach. a Zeldris approach. Zeldris was never bad. It's just the circumstances he was in made it look like he was. So that's exactly what I decided to do with this version of Deku. And honestly, I think it turned out pretty well. So if you guys think the same thing, definitely make sure to go down below and smash that like button. Seeing as your boy brought y'all a movie, it's the least you can do. Share this video with a friend, as well as comment down below anything you guys thought of the video, as well as report your attendance down below. And go check out our group channel, the Akatsuki, link down in the description, as well as go check out my boy Blue Keith. He has a pretty good art channel. And that being said, it has been your boy Zether, and I am out. I love y'all. Peace.